Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Olympus. Starting the camera just as I got a tickle in my throat. Okay, today I am going to redo the interior forms and then model them further around the central portrait as well. And then from there, we'll start redeveloping the tones and subtleties of the skin tones and shadows of the portrait with very thin glazes, as opposed to the pretty opaque glaze that I laid down last night, which really wasn't deliberate, but actually it'll work out in the favor of this painting, because once I develop the colors again within the figure, I think it'll add a really nice layer of depth as well as texture. But the facture is already working in its favor, so I'm just gonna exaggerate it. So here we go.
No matter how well they nursed him, they could not compare with Demeter. All night long they propitiated the glorious goddess as they trembled in fear. And when dawn appeared, they told the whole truth to powerful Celius, as the goddess had commanded them, Demeter, whose crown is splendid. Then Celius called his many subjects to an assembly and commanded them to build an opulent temple for Demeter, whose hair grew in rich plaits as only a goddess's does. And he told them to build an altar on the rising hill. And as soon as they heard his voice, they obeyed him and built the temple as he had bid them. And the temple grew under her help. When they finished the temple and had stopped working and went home, each to his own house, but golden-haired Demeter remained there, sitting apart from all the blessed gods, wasting away with longing for her daughter, Persephone, whose robe hung in thick folds about her knees. Then she made a deadly year for mankind, withering the soil that is so nourishing, and earth would not send up seeds, because Demeter, the goddess who wears a splendid crown, kept them hidden. In vain the oxen pulled the curved plowshare through the fields, and much white barley fell to the earth where it was wasted. And now she would have destroyed the whole race of mortal men by famine, and robbed the gods of their honors and sacrifices, the gods who have Olympus for their home, had not Zeus perceived this, and pondered it in his heart. First he sent Iris, who flies on wings of gold, to call upon Demeter, whose hair grew in rich plaits as only a goddess's does, and whose face glows with beauty. That was his decision, and Iris obeyed Zeus, the storm-black son of Cronus. Swiftly she cut through the sky and arrived at the city of Eleusis, where incense perfused the air. She found Demeter in her temple, wearing the dark robes of her mourner, and she spoke this flutter of words. Demeter, Father Zeus calls you to come rejoin the undying race of the gods who will always be. Come now, don't let my message from Zeus go unheeded. That's what she said, imploring her, but Demeter's mind could not be changed. Then Father Zeus sent out all the blessed gods, and one by one they went to her and called upon her and gave her many splendid gifts and let her choose as much honor as she might want among the immortals. But no one could persuade her to change her mind, since she was so angry, and she stubbornly ignored their pleas. She said she would never again set foot on fragrant Olympus, or let the earth bear fruit, unless she saw her beautiful daughter with her own eyes. Finally, Zeus heard this, Zeus the thunder god, and he sent Hermes, who carries a golden wand, into Erebus. Hermes, who they call the Argus killer, because he slew that 100-eyed monster. And now Zeus sent him that he might exhort Hades with soft words, to let him lead holy Persephone out of the sunless west into the light. Then her mother would see her with her own eyes, and seeing her, change her temper. So Leaving the seat of Olympus, Hermes obeyed and rushed through the hollows of the earth. He found the Lord of the dead seated in his house on a couch with his awesome wife, but it was not her will that kept her seated there, since all she could will was her mother. But her mother was far away, thinking over what the gods had done. Standing nearby, the mighty slayer of Argus addressed him. Lord of death, you, Hades, whose hair is purple, Father Zeus commanded me to lead glorious Persephone out of Erebus back to us gods, so that her mother, when she sees her with her own eyes, will stop her wrath and her horrible anger against the immortals, because she is planning a great act of vengeance. She is going to destroy the feeble race of mortals who dwell on the earth. This will she do by keeping the seeds hidden underground, and so will she cause the honors that are paid to the gods to perish. She has a furious wrath, and won't mingle with the gods. Instead, she sits apart from us in her fragrant temple, which is scented with incense, and she holds as her domain now the rocky citadel of Eleusis. He said that, and the Lord of the dead, Adonis, smiled and raised his eyebrows, nor did he disobey the command of Zeus the king. Hurrying, he gave these commands to Persephone, the queen of miracles. Go, Persephone, to your mother, the lady who wears deep purple robes, and have a kindly spirit in your breast, and be not so despondent. I will not make so bad a husband for you amongst the immortals. After all, I am Zeus's brother. When you are there in his realm, you will rule over all the plants that grow and all moving creatures. Yours will be the greatest honor amongst all immortals, and anyone who fails to make sacrifices to you and does not perform your rites or forgets to offer you appropriate gifts will learn the consequences. He said that, and Persephone rejoiced, and quickly jumped up from her throne in glee. But he himself gave her in secret the sweet pomegranate seed to eat, so that she might not remain forever with her mother, the awesome Demeter, whose robe is a deep purple. Then Adonis, who rules over many, harnessed his immortal horses to a golden chariot. Persephone got into the chariot, and beside her sat the mighty slayer of Argus, Hermes, who held the reins and a whip in his hands. And they sped through the hall with horses eager to fly. Quickly they made the long journey back, and neither sea nor the waters of the rivers could hinder the flight of such immortal horses. No, nor even the grassy valleys nor the mountain tops, but always onwards did they cut through the air over the very mountain tops like a ship through the deep ocean. And then Hermes stopped them where Demeter was waiting in front of her temple, perfumed with incense. And when she saw her daughter, she ran to her as a man racing through a mountain wood runs. 387 to 405. That restoration and sleep. And Persephone, for her part, when she saw her mother's beautiful eyes, leapt from the chariot and fell on her knees, covering her mother with embracing. But while Demeter still was caressing her child and holding her in her arms,
I really like this brushstroke right here.
and trembling with her fear, she stopped fondling her beloved daughter and spoke these words. My child, when you were below the earth, did you eat any food? Tell me the truth and don't hide anything from me, so that we both may know. Because if you didn't accept his hospitality, you can flee from the halls of that loathsome Hades and dwell with me and your father, the storm-black son of Cronus, where you will be honored by all the immortals. But if you did eat anything, you will have to make the journey back again to the depths of the earth and live with Hades for a third part of the seasons of the year, and stay here with me and the other immortals for only 2 of the 3. When the earth abounds with all the fragrant blossoms that come with spring, then from the sunless west out of the dark night you'll rise and appear as a great miracle to the gods and mortal men. Athena. And with what trick did the god who receives all deceive you? Persephone, most beautiful, answered her. I will tell you everything just as it truly happened, mother. When Hermes came to me, Hermes the helper and swift messenger of the gods, when he came, beseeched by my father Zeus, son of Cronus, and by all other gods who live on Olympus, when he came to lead me out of Erebus so that you could see me with your own eyes, he came so that you would cease your wrath with the immortals and calm your terrible anger. So he came, and I jumped up for joy, but he, Hades, forced upon me a pomegranate seed, forced it upon me against my will so that I would eat it. And I did eat that sweet fruit. And I will also tell how he seized me according to the plan of my father, the son of Cronus, and brought me into the hollows of the earth. I'll tell you all this, everything you have asked. All of us were playing in a lush meadow, my friends and I, Leucippe and Phino, Electra and Ianthe, and I was playing with Melite and Yaki, Rhodia and Calero, Melibosus and Tyche, and also with Osira, who is as beautiful as a flower herself. There were also Chrysis, Yanera, Acasti and Admete, Rhodope, Pluto and Calypso, who all men desire, and with us were Styx and Urania, lovely Galatzora and Pallas, who spurs on battles, and Artemis the archer. Thus we all played, all virgins and full bloomed in youth. We gathered the blossoms of earth in our hands, flower gathering flower, bouquets of gentle crocus, iris and hyacinth, rosebuds and lilies, gorgeous to see. And there was a narcissus, the wide earth had brought it forth, glorious as a crocus, a jewel, and in ecstasy I spied it and plucked it. But the earth gave way beneath, and from her burst the great Lord Hades, who receives many. In his golden chariot he carried me beneath the earth, and I struggled all unwilling, screaming shrill a lament. Wretched though it makes me, I have told you the whole truth. Thus they were in harmony with each other, and for the whole day they comforted one another, and their embraces finally softened their grief, each receiving and giving joy. Then to them came Hecate, who wears a delicate veil, and she also caressed the daughter of holy Demeter, and from that time on, Lady Hecate was the servant and companion of Persephone. Zeus, the thunder god, sent a messenger to them, Rhea, whose hair grew in rich plaits as only a goddess's does, and she was sent to lead back Demeter, whose robes are purple dark, to the race of the gods. Then Zeus promised to give her whatever honor she wanted from the immortal gods, and he consented to the plan that the girl spend a third part of each spiraling year in the dark where the sun goes down, but that 2/3 would be spent with her mother and the other immortals. That's what he said, and the goddess did not disobey Zeus's message. Swiftly she fled down from the peaks of Olympus and sped to the Rarian plain. Formerly this plain was the richest of fields that give life, but at this time it gave no life at all, lying waste and barren and all leafless. And the white barley was hidden in the earth by Demeter's plan. But in a little while, as the springtime progressed, it would be waving long ears of grain like a mane in the wind, and its fertile furrows would be filled with grain lying at harvest, while other ears would be bound in sheaves. It was in that field that she alighted first out of the uncharted sky. When the goddesses saw each other, they embraced and rejoiced in their hearts. Then Rhea, who wore a delicate veil, said, verse 62 to 70, text damaged, reconstruction uncertain. Come, my child. Zeus, the thunder god, calls you to rejoin the race of the gods, and he promised whatever honors you might want from the other immortals. He agreed that your daughter spend a third part of each spiraling year in the dark where the sun goes down, and the other two-thirds with you and the other immortals. That's what he said was to be, and he nodded his head in assent. So come, child, and obey, and persist not in fighting with the stormy son of Cronus, but once again give the earth's fruit to mankind. That's what she said, and she was not disobeyed. For as soon as she had finished speaking, Demeter made fruits spring up from the rich plowlands, and the whole wide world became heavy with leaves and flowers. Then she went forth to the kings who administered justice, Triptolemus and Diocles, who drive horses, and the mighty Eumolpus and Celius, the leader of his people. To them she showed the performance of her rites and taught her mysteries, holy rites that are awesome, that no one may transgress nor reveal nor express in words, for an overwhelming reverence for the gods stops his voice. Whoever among men who walk the earth has seen these mysteries is blessed, but whoever is uninitiated and has not received his share of the right, he will not have the same lot as the others, once he is dead and dwells in the moon where the sun goes down. And when the goddess among the goddesses had taught them everything, she went to Mars, to be in the company of other gods. There, the two goddesses live with Zeus, who delights in the thunderbolts, and they are holy and revered. Whomever the goddesses love among men who walk the earth, he is blessed, for they soon sent Plutus into his great house to live at his own will, Plutus, who gives wealth to mortal men. But come now, you goddesses who preside over the town of Eleusis, where incense perfumes the air, you too who also have domains on Paros, which the sea surrounds, and in mountainous Antron, you, Lady Dio, who bring in the seasons and gives us splendid gifts, you and your beautiful daughter Persephone, come now grant me an easy life for my soul, and still again may I pray to sing the song. Translation by Gurney Staples.
Him. Alright, now then. I'll turn the purple into a deeper blue, into the sky again too. Interesting. Time hit 20 minutes, 9 minutes left. Okay. Alright, another 10 minutes. I'll go ahead and have a snack. Alright, that's the end of the audio book of Carl Ruck, Albert Hoffman, and Wasson, Gordon Wasson, the Road to Eleusis, at least chapters 1 through 3 and 5, The Hymn to Demeter, are posted to my channel under the Carl Ruck playlist. If anybody wants to check that out, it's fantastic. Okay.
I sound like I give a lot of advice. For a guy who claims the light touch. Well, you know, one of the weird things about magnetic tape is any opinion you ever express will be marketed forever, no matter how many times you change your mind. So, you know, causes I loathe and now denounce are furiously making money because somewhere else in hyperspace I'm furiously flogging and pushing. One more reason why we should be critical of everything we hear. You don't know whether it's fresh or rehash or whatever. But we'll probably get around to monotony, monogamy, and this weekend more neophony. But all these ophony things eventually get worked through. So good. Well, that was very exciting. Because somewhere around Nicholas, I began to realize that we were headed for a perfect no-hitter. Nobody said that they were a psychotherapist. Well, close the doors and let the record show that for the first time in 40 years, a group was able to be held at Esalen that was not dominated by psychotherapists. Of course, they're the 35 people who are not here this weekend. But that's fine. It's great that, I mean, it almost is like an argument for the morphogenetic field, because my interests are evolving and changing, and it feels like, you know, I'm a bird in a flock, and the whole thing is slightly shifting direction. Did anybody not get who needs one of these seats? Or I'll just move this on around. So many people in the arts and in media, and to have 3 people even claim to be writers is an astonishing record. So it must be, you know, the stars are in a slightly different position or something. I actually thought coming over here this evening that probably most people coming to this workshop would have been ultimately better served if they stayed home and read Mason Dixon, Tom Pynchon's new novel. But then I thought, you know, saying that to any group I've ever had would just provoke baffled bewilderment. But it seems like something you might be able to hear. So why didn't you stay home and read Mason Dixon? We've been reading it here and discussing it as much as my staff groups would tolerate. And you know, it's not a small thing in a culture to be able to bring forth great literature. And I don't think there's been any great literature on the American scene for a long time. I'm not fond of those East Coast tormented realists, you know, the John Cheevers and Sal Bellows of this world. I consider that stuff hideously second rate. Tom Pynchon is a great writer. Problem is, he usually scares the shit out of your moral self because his vision is so dark. You know, V is extraordinarily dark. We said in the staff workshops, there's there are passages in V that probably most people should go to the grave without ever reading. Dimensions to the human soul most people don't need to know about. Now you'll all, of course, rush out and read it. I know. But Mason and Dixon is not like that. It's an incredible summation of his life and his literary power, so forth and so on. I don't want to spend too much time on that.
How would you compare Gravity's Rainbow to
Well, Crying of Lot 49 is a pretty minor piece. Gravity's Rainbow, you know, Joyce said of Ulysses, he said it was his day book, and the Finian's Wake was the night book. I would say Gravity's Rainbow is Pynchon's night book, and I really read V as it's all the same, V and Gravity's Rainbow, the same characters even appear. Mason and Dixon is his day book, Pynchon's day book. It's life affirming. You know, it leaves you with a tear in your eye if you can believe that. And yet it's curious, because here we are at the end of the millennium, at the end of the American century. This is our greatest writer. He produces a work of staggering genius, but something about the circumstances of the time forced him to set it entirely in the 1760s and write it in the language of Jonathan Swift. So, you know, it's not, in the ordinary sense, contemporary. It isn't about scarified people with dilemmas. It's about people who wear powdered wigs and have dilemmas. And what he makes clear is the difference ain't that great. One of the themes of that book, and one of the themes we'll talk about this weekend, is this curious feeling which adheres to being associated with cutting-edge technologies in all times and places. You know, right now maybe it's VRML or something like that, but once it was powered flight, and once it was the telegraph, and once it was the astrolabe, and once it was, you can fulfill this list as you please, but always around these things there's a feeling of breakthrough, unlimited horizons, and a feeling that can only be described as modern. Well, I don't want to talk too much about that.
All right, I'm going to cut this here. We're about to run out of time on this memory segment and pick it up with a second take.
Right.
Take two.
This is probably I was late and the staff. Well, no matter. The only predictable thing about this weekend, I guess, is that usually we set aside Saturday nights for a discussion of the state of the art of novelty theory and the time lag. How many of you have heard this rap at least once? Okay, most of you. Well, we'll do it again anyway. However, there is news. There have been developments that I've been very quiet about over the past year, and that I'll talk about for the first time tomorrow night. For those of you, for the 5 people in the universe who actually care about this, it will be epical. The rest, spectator sport. Okay, well, I suppose I should make a sort of introduction of myself. I was born, I'm 50. I was born a few months after the atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. I was born in November of 46. I'm a double Scorpio, or I don't know, something like that. and born in western Colorado, and lived there till I was 16, came to California, finished high school here, went to Cal, was around Berkeley for 8 or 9 years when I wasn't in Asia, and I was in Asia a lot. First in the Seychelles, where I tried to emigrate. Then in India, mostly smuggling hash and buying art. And then when that became untenable, I went to Indonesia and collected butterflies for Singapore Chinese for a while, and then taught English in Japan, and then went to the Amazon in '71, and that trip to the Amazon is the subject of a book I wrote called True Hallucinations, which is the most narrative and novel-like of my books. The other books are pretty hard, slogging essays, or without even the decency of chapter breaks, just long, poly-subject harangues. But True Hallucinations is about my brother and myself and a number of other people going to the Amazon and encountering really psychedelics. We had encountered them before in Berkeley, subculture in the form of LSD and cannabis, but actually encountering psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, and that was the intellectual compass that set the direction of my life. And I was just completely stunned and transformed that such a thing could exist, A, and that it could be not subject, A, on everybody's plate all over the world, B, that seemed to me completely bizarre that people weren't talking about these transformations. And then, of course, I had the satisfying experience of watching the whole culture become obsessed with, convulsed by, and then later to reject these substances and then go through a period of denial. January 20th, 1968, I left the 10th of January and didn't come back until around Watergate time, and he was definitely on the ropes. In the past few years, my interests have, I see everything to me as referent to the psychedelic experience, but it's gone from being, for me, a lens to personal understanding, to being the clue to understanding much about the circumstance of being human, generally speaking. And I've written about the impact of psychedelics on early human evolution and how alkaloids in the early human food chain had unique properties which tended to focus and elicit what we call higher consciousness, or a very advanced kind of coordinated perception of the world, which leads ultimately into myth-making and language. And so I was able to take the psychedelic experience, which had before that been largely understood, as I said, individually and therapeutically, and say, no, this is bigger even than that. It's something that we can use to actually understand the human condition and the relationship of human beings to the rest of nature. But apparently my capacity for megalomania is endless. And so after a few years of working out all the adumbrations of those ideas, it now seems to me something else is on the horizon, which is this general thrust toward alteration and expansion of consciousness has now been able to take root in domains other than pharmacology, specifically communications technologies and the technologies which transform and move data around the planet. And it seems almost as though what was anticipated in the vegetable trances in the Amazon 30 years ago, things like group-mindedness, gestalt perceptions integrating very large fields of data and all of this, are actually now on the cultural horizon, not as drugs, but as hardwired technologies delivered as though they were public utilities, the internet specifically. My thunder has sort of been stolen on this subject by Dogbert, because I saw last week in Dilbert that Dogbert was explaining to Dilbert that the internet was going to become God. And it was basically my rap line for line. It was humbling to see how idiotic it seemed when stated by a small fat dog talking to a man with an up-flipped tie. Yes, a caricature. And Dilbert observed that if the internet becomes God, it will certainly change the kind of files he's been downloading, which gave me pause because I download some of those same files. But nevertheless, something is happening. It's been happening for a long time, and it is rooted in this psychedelic dimension somehow. We are the tool-making branch of organic nature on this planet. I mean, yes, wasps build nests, and beavers build dams, and swallows build those inverted things out of mud. But these are genetically programmed, endlessly iterated, never elaborated patterns of behavior. We do something very different. We are very flexible in our intellectual productions, and we build our intellectual productions have historicity built into them. We don't iterate the past, we modify the past. And so unlike the story of the chipmunks, the beavers, or the honeybees, human existence has different characteristics depending on where in time you slice into it. A population in Paleolithic France is very different from a population in modern Manhattan, and yet the species remains the same. Well, what is this tool-making business that we're about, and where is it taking us? What is it doing to the human body image, self-image, community, so on? As you listen to me, if you know the territory, you'll recognize that I'm a thoroughgoing McLuhan. It's in many of my assumptions. In other words, it's very clear to me that one of the things that we've overlooked in trying to understand our circumstances is the hidden impact of forms of media on our cultural values, aesthetic canons, even our gender relations and economic arrangements and so forth and so on. McLuhan was very keen, sort of his special area of expertise was print, and he was very keen to sort of tease apart the impact of print on the Western mind from its inception to the present. And he concluded basically that that we are essentially print-created people, or at least the people of this generation
Right along.
were, and that all of the institutions of Western culture that we unquestioningly give our loyalty to are in fact
Okay.
peculiar
Are you okay,
adaptations
David?
sanctioned and made inevitable by print. He saw the uniformity and linearity of print as permitting such things as the concept of the nation state, democracy. After all, isn't democracy a notion of interchangeable parts, all of the one man, one vote concept? This is an idea which McLuhan felt only made sense inside a print culture. He talked about what he called sensory ratios being subtly shifted by the introduction of new technologies. In some of his more specific predictions, he proved himself to be as culture-bound and capable of absurdity as any of the things he was criticizing. But I think in his general approach to things, he was pretty spot on. And any information transforming medium can be treated this way. In understanding media, McLuhan talks about the electric light as a form of media. He never wrote about psychedelics, but certainly psychedelics transform the sensory ratios and the modalities of perception. I would argue that what psychedelics do is they are, in a sense, deconditioning agents. And what they wipe out is local forms of conditioning, culture. Culture is something more and more that I like to talk about. And I've sort of gone down a line of thinking that is not very PC, but that gives me a lot of intellectual relief from the agony of my life. And I suspect it might work for other people too. It's the concept that culture is not your friend, and that we need to get right up front about this, about how culture is not your friend. The role of culture in the lives of societies has changed in the 20th century. We all live too long now to be duped by culture in the way that previous populations were. You know, if the average member of a population only lives to age 40, the cultural con can go on and on and on. But if you give people lifespans into the 80s, then they get 40 years to think about what they went through between 0 and 40, and eventually they'll figure out just who and what screwed them. And when they do, they are not going to be very happy with the cultural values that they attempted to come to terms with and work through. I was thinking about how I would talk about this tonight, and though we've been talking about these kinds of ideas in the staff teaching all week, I didn't realize till this afternoon what frontal assault this concept is on one of the most cherished notions that has flourished around this place, which is the idea of the inner child. And I realized that really what I was about was not the inner child, but a quite different program, overcoming culturally induced neoteny. Neoteny is a biological phenomenon that we will also this weekend talk about as a sociological phenomenon. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood. It's a strategy in biology. For instance, our hairlessness is a neonatal trait, evolutionarily speaking. All primates are born hairless, but we retain this into adulthood. The ratio of our skull to our torso in adult human beings is a fetal ratio when compared to other primates. And I'm fascinated by the question, and Dennis and I got into an argument in our hotel room last, because we both spoke at a conference a week ago where I said this, and he said, well, is all culture have this infantile and juvenilizing property, or is there something specifically pathological about Western culture? And at first I was willing to argue that all culture does this, makes children of its members. But I think to some degree it's true that all culture is somewhat unfriendly to the individual. When their heavy arm falls on your shoulder and they tell you that you're going to be sent off to some foreign hellhole to kill people, as a young man, you definitely suddenly get the notion that culture is not your friend. But perhaps, if you're a 12-year-old boy in an Amazonian tribe and they announce that now it's time for the 2-week abandonment in the woods, from which if you live to tell the tale, you'll become a full member of society, I'm not sure those kids greet that with the leap of joy in their hearts. It's like, oh my God, now this, we knew it was coming. I went through rites of passage like that were excruciating. Where I grew up in western Colorado, you weren't a real man unless sometime between 12 and 16 you killed an elk. Hunting season every October was an excuse for this insane rite of passage, and my father was an unquestioning inhabitant of this culture, and so this was always in front of me. And when I was, when I was 12, I went the first time, I didn't get anything. The second year we went out, and my father, I'm sure, had no idea what a wilted pansy I was in this situation, because I had hid it from him. I mean, I was concerned about all kinds of things, and eventually this situation arose where they put me up on this point and gave me a gun and said, if anything came by, to blow it away. And, by God, this thing, chose to sacrifice itself as far as I could tell. I mean, it did not behave at all like elk behaved. It basically just came out of the woods, stood still. I pulled down on it, closed my eyes, prayed. There was an enormous noise. When I opened my eyes, there was nothing whatsoever to be seen. I felt an enormous relief that this thing had escaped, and walked over to find it dead as a doormat. And the oak leaves dipped in the blood, the cup of blood of the whole thing, and I couldn't believe how atavistic this stuff was. However, I never had to please my father again. I was home free. Everything was forgiven from that moment on. But it brought home to me how uncomfortable culture is, and always has been, I think, and is getting more so. And this is something that's going on because of a hellish marriage between psychology and modern advertising. the game of manipulation, the stakes are rising because market analysis and behavioral forms of psychology and treatment of large numbers of people have created an enormous capacity to reach people with commercial messages and manipulate their lives. Yeah, did you want to say something?
Were you saying that this created idea extends into all kinds of things, and television and radio also, and the internet? And I didn't...
No. See, what McLuhan was saying was that he didn't live to see the internet, but he talked a great deal about television. And he felt that television would destroy the print creative world. And I think he was right to some degree. Television is a completely different creature. It's very physiologically involving. It's hard to see it. You have to look at it. And McLuhan talked a lot when he
All
talked
right,
about
I think
contrast
that
to the manuscript
sets it up
culture, which is what culture in
a little
the
more
Americas
solidly
was. And he
for
pointed out
starting
that
to do
manuscript
more subtle
culture,
glaze work and developing the
you
central
cannot
figure.
read manuscripts.
And that sort of integrates everything
Look at them, and you figure
one
out
into
what
the other.
they
Let's see if I
say.
get the
Because you're
tripod
unfamiliar
here.
with the handwriting style in
All
print,
right.
especially in the early years of print. There were a very limited
Zoom in.
number of fonts, and every lowercase a
There you go.
was made to look as much like every other lowercase a as possible. So this new function comes into being called reading, and reading is a very specialized form of looking. Thomas Aquinas was...
Okay. But I think that's it for the moment. So thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Olympus. Have a good day, Earth.
By having